The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everybody, and good evening. This time from the United States, from Phoenix, Arizona, and things are a little different. I almost didn't make it onto the program. I don't know what happened, but here I am, and I'm glad to see all of you. I just, will welcome you, Alexandra and Anna and Annette, Barbara, Catherine, Chris, Karen, Margot, Mariut, Martha, Natney, Rebecca, Risto, Sam, Suzanne, Vera, Winnie, Zenaidi, and Veronica. And over here on the right-hand side, we have Michael, Stacy, and Tuija is there too. And so welcome to our little glamour webinar. Actually, here we're doing it the night before. It's actually meant to be the Friday, but you know how it goes with global time zones. Let's just have a little bit of an alignment here. And in the silence, wherever we may be, in terms of our outer form, in our localized environment, it's as still as if we are one field of consciousness, one field of consciousness. And our purpose, of course, in these troubled times when people are not thinking clearly, nor are they thinking in the long term. They are swept by their limited desires, which relate to the misinterpretations of the global situation and of their own situation, which we call illusion. So there is a mental fixation, and the desires follow and reinforce that fixation, and they become glamorous and begin to veil reality. And, we have important governmental processes going on right now. I would say, especially in the United States and the UK, two collections of nations and states which have the second ray soul. And we know that the Christ has the second ray soul, and probably, of course, the second ray monad, and that he will be working through nations that really express the second ray, and thus the battle of the forces of opposition to the work which he plans to do by upsetting the environment in which he could otherwise appear. But at least from my reckoning, and seeing all that has to be done to prepare the way, as I've often said, let's establish the masters in the 5 planetary centers and their initiates around them, and their disciples and so forth. And let's have the local countries around those planetary centers applying to conversation with the masters and their groups, asking for the best advice, and having a global outlook which involves an attitude towards sharing, and an attitude towards peace, and an attitude towards what we might call clean interplay. All that's going to take time. And the Aquarian age technically begins in 98 years from now. Probably, it's difficult to say exactly what month, but probably at the vernal equinox in the year 2117, 2117. So we have a lot of work to do here, and one of the things is really to clarify the perception of so many really misguided people, and we're going to see this misguidance rise up in our face under the influence of the planet Pluto, which will definitely be active along with Vulcan, spiritual will, before the first initiation of an individual or before the first initiation of humanity. What some of us may not realize is that the reappearance of the Christ will signal that humanity in its upper brackets, to use that word that Alice Bailey and DK seem to use, will have taken the first initiation. When the Christ reappears, it will be the signal that humanity itself has taken the first initiation. At least a significant enough number of human beings to leaven the consciousness of the whole significantly. And so you can well imagine that over the next 100 years or so, we're going to be fighting our way through the effects of Pluto and through the effects of Vulcan, the spiritual will, which can cause heavy destruction and pressure, as well as a forging of new types of relationships, which we need. And we're going to see that those cross currents of dwindling Pisces and an emerging Aquarius really play against each other in a significant manner. The dying out of the sixth-ray religions to a certain extent, the dying out of Piscean and sixth-ray attitudes will be occurring during this 21st century, so that by the end of the century, very little of it will be remaining. And this especially affects the United States, which is the heir to the Piscean sixth-ray civilization, and hence the trouble. And hence what we see even now, people just baldly seeking their own personal welfare without thinking about humanity at all. You know, we've been dealing with issues like deception and manipulation, lying, egotism, separation. All of those constellate with each other. And they're all based on something I want to reread here, because when we finished last time, we had some really interesting statements about the cause of glamour. So, you know, we're on our way to disillusionment, which is a good thing, even though it's a little uncomfortable. Release from glamour is called disillusionment. It will be apparent to you, he says, if you have studied these instructions with care, that the cause of glamour is primarily based on the sense of duality. Now just think about that, you know, for a second. The subject and the object. It's a very Cartesian, you know, Rene Descartes seemed to split the subject and the object forever. And then along came the new physics and gave the lie to that particular rather obvious solution, which was not essentially true. And then along comes occultism and tells you that the subject is the object and the object is the subject, which is arrived at in the state of contemplation, a Libran method of meditation. So this sense of duality has to be overcome. If such duality did not exist, there would be no glamour. And that's really something we have to overcome and think about, because we are in the process of seeking what might be called unitive consciousness, which is consciousness of a oneness which includes the subject and object and essentially identicalizes the subject and the object. Identicalizes the subject and the object. So we need to be quite proficient in meditation before that state, which is sometimes called samadhi, can be achieved. If such a duality did not exist, there would be no glamour. And this perception of the dual nature of all manifestation lies at the very root of the trouble or troubles with which humanity is in time and space faced. Now remember, it's particularly acute on our planet because when we graduate from this school we call the Earth, we are meant to be adjudicators between the pairs of opposites. In other words, we can judge with accuracy between what is spirit soul and what is matter, what is subject, what is object, and what is the relation between. We might say that spirit is subject, matter is object, and soul is the relation between. Soul considered as consciousness is the relation between. So we're in trouble within our consciousness because it's so dull and so divided. And even among disciples and aspirants such as we are, we don't grasp with real accuracy the absolute unity and identicality even of all we perceive. I had a name for it. I'll have to look it up again. It's sort of like uniception, or it has to do with infuception. I think that's it. Infuception. The perceiving of all objects as if they were infused by that factor of being which identicalizes them all. And so all things are the same thing, except in the great Mahamaya they are not, and we are forever faced with Mahamaya without beginning and without end. Okay. So these are the troubles. The perception passes through various stages and constitutes the great problem of the conscious entity. That's our problem. We were individualized, now we're a conscious entity. For millions of years we've been evolving our consciousness, and we're faced with moving out of duality into unity and finally into oneness, sameness, identicality. This condition is a difficulty in the realm of consciousness itself and is not really inherent in substance or matter. So our major efforts are to so change the perceptive abilities of our consciousness that we actually see the unity and identify as the unity and as the one even. So we're progressing from duality into what I call monality, and you'll recognize that the monad is right there in that word monality, because monadic perception is completely identificatory. What a word. Identificatory, meaning that when the monad perceives, it only perceives itself. Okay, so we go on with the problem. The dweller in the body perceives wrongly. Now think about that. That's who we are. We're the dweller in the body, and all of our problems have to do with misperception. He interprets incorrectly that which is perceived. So, we're really in illusion, glamour, all the time, really. He proceeds to identify himself with that which is not himself. He thinks he is the lower ego. He thinks he is the personality. He thinks he is the little self. And while all things are all things, so in a sense it's ultimately true, it's not really true in time and space. All things are what he basically is, which is the one factor of being. Just pause for a moment on that, because no matter what you perceive, see, hear, whatever, it emerged out of identical beingness. If you're looking at the farthest galaxy or quasar or any of the great astronomical factors, you are there and you are it. And right here on the planet, every little odd little thing perceived, whether it's I'm looking around me, a pen, a cup, glasses, whatever, they all came out of what is called in the divine Pimander, the only one thing. Only one thing. It was supposedly written by Hermes Trismegistus, but really I think by Neoplatonic students who were inspired by his example. And as we know, he's deeply related to the Master R. So anyway, he proceeds to identify himself with that which is not himself. That particular sentence is the root of all the difficulty. And you know, identification is a funny thing. You know, you look at that which you carry around with you all the time as an instrument, and you think it is you, and it's not. In other words, and in other words, the instrument is separable from the identity. This is the problem with glamour, okay? Because we just get so immersed in the object, and we get our emotions working in relation to the object and its preservation, and we're all caught up in the phenomenal worlds that the Buddha told us to remain detached from, that we sink deeply into glamour and to our emotions support unrealities. Our emotions support unrealities. He proceeds to identify himself with that which is not himself. He shifts his consciousness into a realm of phenomena, you know, the lower 21 subplanes, and especially bad, the lower 18 subplanes of the cosmic physical plane, or we can call it the solar planes. His consciousness is shifted into a realm of phenomena, which engulfs him, deludes him, you know, leads him astray, right? And imprisons him until such time as he becomes restless and unhappy under the sense that something is wrong. And, you know, when you read stuff like that, you think of, I have a little problem here. I thought I had copied something and I didn't do it, but now I will. And this is the story, and you know the story. The prodigal son is awakening to the unreality of his present life in the phenomenal worlds. That's what the whole story is about. You know, you come to yourself and you begin to realize that you're engulfed and you're overcome and you're deluded, and basically the whale has swallowed Jonah, you know, the great whale of big size, which is the lower planes and all of their phenomena. In this case, Jupiter is not so good. The whale swallows Jonah, and eventually Jonah has to swallow the whale. Although, you know, it seems like it can't happen, but Jonah is the soul and can do that. So we are deluded, we are imprisoned, we are engulfed until such a time as we become restless, unhappy, under the sense that something is wrong. I'm sure that many of us, having experienced what life was supposed to be, at least according to our parents and our near ones and those who cared about us but didn't really have the slightest idea about the esoteric life, when we begin to experience what they had in mind for us, we rebel against that. And we sound our note again, so to speak. We rebel. And we begin to search now for the way to peace, Shambhala, right? And happiness, Shambhala again, so that everything is right, and it takes a long time. Then he finally comes to the recognition that he is not what he seems to be. It's the old mistaken identity problem which lies at the roots of all of our issues. First of all, I think I am not you, and I think you are you and I am I. Well, that's only functionally true. It's not essentially, philosophically true. So the mistaken identity problem, every egoist has a terrible time with that one, because the egoist is dwelling in splendid isolation in the center of his own field of consciousness and is narcissistically taking up a great space within his own consciousness. And we've got a lot of these narcissists running around who just haven't looked any further than their own little ring past knot. And we cannot let them be leaders. We cannot let them be leaders. We cannot let them be leaders. The mistaken identity problem, and that the phenomenal world of appearances is not identical with reality. One day we wake up and we realize it is so, as he had hitherto supposed it to be. From that moment on, he comes to the sense of duality, to the recognition of otherness, which doesn't really exist at all except in a practical sense, and to the perception that his sense of dualism should be ended, and that a process of unification and an attempt to achieve at-one-ment should be undertaken. And I'm sure many of us are motivated precisely by the thoughts that the Tibetan has just expressed here. Otherness is unreal, dualism should be ended, the process of unification and at-one-ment should be undertaken, and as we build the Antakarana, that is what is happening. From that moment, other troubles take the place of the original troubles. From that moment, the troubles of the evolving man begin to be observed by him and consciously encountered, not just an unconscious responsiveness that gets you into all kinds of attachments and difficulties, but consciously encountered. And so we begin to manage our life, and we begin to see what's in the way, which is what we're doing right now. What are the glamours that are in the way? What are the illusions which are in the way? And he faces a long period of extrication from glamour and the entering into that world wherein only unity is known. This is, I just have to marvel. This little section by the Tibetan is so super clear about what our problem really is, and that perception of a certain kind and the consciousness that it produces are at fault, causing our glamorous ensnarement. Okay, ensnaring. So at least, and then we look on at other people and we see that they're fighting out in the fourth kingdom, this very, very human drama, which is based upon the conflict between the opposites. And the opposites are pretty much like any two things, that over there is not this which I am. And eventually we change the word that and this around, and we say, thou art not this, thou art that, the big thing, And we just become increasingly universal in our consciousness. And that universality is the gift of Aquarius. This is the sign of universal love, the sign of universality, the sign of a perceived oneness in the midst of plenteous multiplicity. In other words, the issue of the one and the many, I think, can be solved very well during the next 2,000 something years in the sign Aquarius, because Aquarius is, in a way, the sign of the one and the many. And here, we're going to extricate ourselves from glamour. So what are the stages? The stages might be enumerated as follows. I'm sorry, I took a little long on the review, but I just had to, because it's such a wonderful section that explains in great depth exactly what the issue really is with us and why we are making this fatal mistake, So, and we don't want to make that mistake anymore, which all begins with the issue of mistaken identity. It all begins in that way. And we have to disabuse ourselves of that and become a realized non-instrument, if I can put it that way. In other words, every time we identify as the instrument, we are mistaken. And so if I identify with my emotions, I am mistaken. And if I identify with my lower mind, I am mistaken. And finally, even if I identify with the causal body and the egoic lotus, they're both the same thing, really, I am mistaken. And if the time comes when I begin to identify with the vehicles, which are organized after the third initiation, largely the vehicles of the spiritual triad, I am mistaken. And if I find myself within the temple of Ezekiel, think about that. Ezekiel saw the wheel way in the middle of the air. What was that wheel? Astrological from one point of view, but the monad from another. The temple of Ezekiel is the monad within its vehicle. And even if I identify with the monadic vehicle and not the fiery essence, which is pure being, then I am mistaken again. And so, finally we learn that we are pure being at the heart of all possible rings past not, all possible vehicles. We are pure being at the heart of the great universal sphere itself. And when that breaks up, we find out who we really are. So let's see, we're talking here about extrication from glamour and this long period that we all have to go through. And we're going through it right now. So here are some of the stages involved in it. First, the stage wherein the material world is recognized and valued. This is the glamour of materialism. And what would you say? 85% of the people of the world are immersed in the glamour of materialism. I mean, you can value it as instrumental, and we know we have a redemptive task to bring about within these lower worlds, but we cannot value it as an end in itself, because in a way it's just what's called he talks about some kind of congestion. Yes, a congestion of atoms, as he says. And this congestion is not really real. It's just the way energy has operated to pull the constituents into dense form. So temporarily, this material world is made the goal of all activity. That when we're going through the third ray stage and the rays of attribute at first, before we really get into the occultism of the second subplane and the first subplane, ruled respectively by the second ray and the first ray, takes a while. So first we're functioning in the realm of Brahma, okay? And that is an illusory realm. I'm not talking about Brahman or Brahman, as they say, or Parabrahman. I'm not talking about that. Though that's reality itself. And Blavatsky spends a little bit of time distinguishing between the deity, Brahma, or the just the third aspect of divinity, which is very important, of course, and then the Brahman and the Parabrahman, the reality beyond all form. So, but in this earlier stage, temporarily, it's made the goal of all activity. And man, refusing to recognize the difference existing between him and the material and natural world, seeks to identify himself with it, with the material and natural world, and to find satisfaction in purely physical pleasures and pursuits. DK has this wonderful coloristic description of the ascent of man from red to green to orange to blue and rose, and then out again into the field of green where he leads the games. It's a wonderful, I feel like somehow I feel like describing this or having us look at this. Some of you are familiar with it, I know. But let's just go on here for a second, and then I'll make a decision about whether we go into the colors, because I've always found the particular colors that are presented to be tremendously descriptive of the stages through which we pass, okay? So, and we ask ourselves here, I'm sure as we're growing up and, a young person and all the rest, we recapitulate and we maybe go through stages. I mean, we're not all like Yogananda, where the story is, as a baby, he just sat up and uttered a few wise words and then lapsed back into babyhood, I don't think we're all like that. And we probably go through playing on the field of green. I tell you, when I was a young person, I played a lot of golf. I just was a total golf fanatic, and I'd wake my friends up at 3:30, 4 in the morning to rush out to the golf course and play 36 holes instead of 18 holes. And I found myself playing upon the field of green, But I had one last game when I was a college student, and I hit the ball farther than I've ever hit it before, and I just said, that's it, I'm finished. But they, if you're a golfer, they say, well, you drive for show and you putt for dough. So I never became really good, but it was my field of green, and every human being plays upon the field of green. You'll see what that's all about. So this stage, which is a materialistic stage, it divides itself into two parts. That wherein satisfaction is sought in the almost automatic response of the physical instincts to sex, food, and warmth. Very physical, instinctual. These loom large in the man's consciousness, and to a certain extent, this is primitive man, the caveman phase, Although Blavatsky has some interesting things to say about the caveman, that sometimes when there is a very high civilization and then it falls and disintegrates and is destroyed, people are driven back into a very low stage. And so in a way, what we call the caveman may not have necessarily only preceded the high rank of civilization, but people who are outcasts and driven away from the high civilization through its destruction are reduced to very primitive means and methods and dwellings, and they become again the caveman. The animal nature in man is made the center of the attempt to produce some sense of unity. The unity of the physical body is perhaps the first real unity we experience. Because the inner and subtle man is as yet weak in impact, interesting, right? That doesn't affect the brain very much or the mind such as it is. So the inner subtle man is weak in impact. A physical unification temporarily takes place, which serves to deepen the glamour and delay progress into freedom. So, if you are studying the egoic lotus, which in a way I think we all ought to do, and I've written that video book or taught that video book, which I hope is helping us do that, you will recognize what's going on in petal number 1. The very first petal, the deeply instinctual petal, related to both Aries and Capricorn. It's the beginning of the whole process, and man is a outer physical unity. Now the next part here, okay. So material is the goal of all man's pursuits, and he's finding satisfaction in physical pleasures. Okay, we understand that. And the first stage is really animal man. Okay, it's individualized animal man. There is a difference between animal man, who is not individualized, and then man-animal, who is individualized. But next comes the stage wherein satisfaction and the sense of oneness is sought in the realm of material possessions, not just instincts. So, okay, so I have to say that, not just the satisfaction of physical instincts, and in the establishing of a center of beauty and comfort in life on the physical plane. Now, that's what he says, this is second petal, and that some artistic activity begins in the second petal, and some sense of beauty and the desire to produce beauty is connected with the second petal. Interesting that it should be connected, I believe, with the sign Taurus, ruled by Venus, and having so much to do with artistry as it distributes the fourth ray particularly. So Capricorn, first petal, Taurus, second petal, and Taurus is even doubly emphasized because if you start with Aries and just go in a row, it's Aries, Taurus, first petal, second petal. So Taurus is hit upon twice, okay. And, the agricultural life comes in, and, in terms of modern anthropology, it's no longer strictly the hunter-gatherer. People settle down, they build, they make things beautiful according to their ideal. Therein, the man can be at home and oblivious of a growing sense of dualism, which day after day gets steadily stronger. Now, it doesn't really, let's just say that not until well into the second tier does dualism, or is dualism really cognized, the higher and the lower self. So anyway, this stage only takes place ages later. And when the aspirant is about to reorient himself to truth and to take the first steps towards the probationary path. In other words, the sense of dualism, which might be growing very subtly and slowly in this second petal where the religious impulse is beginning to come out, does not blossom into fullness until we have the real aspirant. And the real aspirant actually appears in the fifth petal. And the climax of the opening of the fifth petal means the first initiation. So this stage only takes place ages later, when he really understands what is the higher and lower self, when the aspirant is about to reorient himself to truth and to take the first steps on the probationary path. But first, the tower must fall. In the tarot, you build a big tower. Some of our politicians do that. You build a big tower, and the tower comes crashing down eventually because you've identified with the tower. So much more so if it's made out of gold or something, that gives the sense of material value. Okay, it is a correspondence towards the end of the path of evolution to the stage above mentioned, which is the first signs of duality. But the man experiencing it is a very different person to the one who now seeks synthesis in the materialization of beauty upon the outer plane. So, this is something, I don't know if I managed to include this in the book, video book on the egoic lotus, but it's certainly relevant. The subtle man is now becoming dominant. The religious impulse is emerging. You get into the third petal, we're going to have a lot of mentality, and here's the important thing. Whoops, sorry. I always have to do that. We, at this point, are still in the Hall of Ignorance. And we are in the Hall of Ignorance throughout the first tier of petals, which are ruled respectively by Capricorn, Taurus, Virgo, or Aries, Taurus, Gemini. Okay, so, maybe get into that book, the video book that I've prepared for you, because I can go into greater detail and turn things this way and that way and upside down and right side up, and you'll see how eventually the wheel turns upon itself. Now, what I want to do, because I think it would be very helpful, at least for some, and I know I'm not making a lot of progress here in terms of pages, but we are getting deeply into certain matters, which I think will help us understand what glamour actually is. So I'm going to go over here to the Alice Bailey books, and I'm going to do my best. I believe we have in the, always have to make this bigger. There's got to be a way to keep it big enough to see, and I think in the discipleship books, and maybe in the raise and initiation, I'll use those three, and cross, overturned, and yes, here it is. All right, so this is from Discipleship Volume 1, and it's just fantastic, really, really excellent area. But what I want to do, I can't do the whole thing right now, okay? I can't do all that, but I can do enough that gives us the sense of where we are in the development of man, and how it takes millions of years to go through this stage, millions of years. Now I've got some kind of crazy little thing going on here, and I'm not sure. Okay, there it is. Okay, so I'm going to just read this to you and see what you think of it. Some of you may have studied this before, but it never hurts. I study it all the time, or, have frequently at least. It's called The Sublimation of the 5 Human Stages. And obviously he's giving us, in our discussion here, a sense of at least 3 stages, I think, or no, maybe it's just 2, through which the man passes. I think, basically you can start in any book of the Tibetans, and you can branch out and read everything he ever wrote just from the center of any point in any book. So that's what I call, the spherical knowledge of the ageless wisdom. So listen carefully and see what you think. Stage 1. The life has climbed the stairway long through daily use of form, through the lesser 3 with progress slow. You know what the lesser 3 are, don't you? I mean, you can, obviously we're dealing with the lower kingdoms of nature, right? Through the lesser three with progress slow, the long path has been traveled. Another door stands open now. The word sounds forth. Enter upon the way of real desire. The life that only knows itself as form, think about that, identification and the cause of glamour, enshrouds itself in vivid red, the red of known desire. It either goes down or horizontal, but not up. And through the red, all longed for forms approach, are grasped and held, used and discarded, until the red, this is the future, till the red changes to rose. Remember that in the causal body, there is no red, maybe a little tint for the first ray souls, but none of the petals are red, until the red changes to rose, and rose to palest pink, and pink to white. Forth flowers then the pure white rose of life. When I had met the last living disciple in DK's group, and she and Keith Bailey and I were all friends, and we discussed a lot of things, and she said, the white rose is the rose of Master Kutumi. The freesia, the flower of Master Moria, the red rose of the Christ. The carnation, possibly, the flower of Master DK. The tiny rose of living life is seen in bud, not yet the full-blown flower. And the full-blown flower is going to be our egoic lotus. And by the time it's full-blown, we don't have problem with glamour anymore. All right, now stage 2, and see what you think of this. The picture changes. Notice that. Change of scene. Even death is just a change of scene. Constantly, we have to learn how to live through these changes of scene. The picture changes form. Another voice coming from close at hand utters another phrase. These mantrams that introduce you to a new way of living. The life continues on its way. And here's where a lot of people with their tennis rackets and golf clubs and all the rest of it enter the field where children play and join their game. Okay, it's going to be soccer, it's going to be cricket, it's going to be baseball, football, whatever it is, it's the field, and join their game. Awakened to the game of life, notice the third ray kind of connotation there with the word game. Awakened to the game of life, the soul passes the gate. And this is really important. The field is green, the color of the third ray, right? And on its broad expanse, the many forms of the one moving life disport themselves. They weave the dance of life, the many patterned forms God takes. The soul enters the playground of the Lord, I love that, and plays thereon until he sees the star with 5 bright points and says, my star. So that's as far as we're going to read right now. And we'll, I'll try to remember, or maybe someone can remind me, that we'll keep on reading this section all the way through the 5 stages, which tell us in terms of color where we really stand. Now, doesn't mean you can't like sports and all the rest of it, of course, but is life a game or is life reality? I think life at first becomes a game, then it becomes reality, then again it becomes a game in which reality works within the field of illusion. So, okay, so then you go to page 674 of Discipleship Volume 1, and you see this marvelous kind of symbolic, coloristic presentation regarding the stages through which we pass. Now, I trust that readers of DK's books, meditators, we're not in the stage of vivid red. We're not even in the stage of green. And we're not even in the stage of the orange star of ambition. Hopefully not, unless it applies to spiritual ambition. So I'm not going to go any further with this right now, realizing, that one can take a long time with these things. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Oh my goodness. I keep on hoping that I can do this correctly once, just one fine day, but I'm not. Oh, I think I've got the wrong one. 1, 2, 3. No. All right. I forget sometimes how to do that. And anyway, it's not important for the moment. I'll just do one of these things and take it across, and that'll be enough. So I'll bring this down. It won't be long, that Tuija and I will be very involved in the conference. So, we'll have a little suspension of our work here in which we are reading the books, like, when we do the reappearance, we're reading the reappearance of the Christ. And when we do the soul of nations, we're reading the destiny of the nations. And here we're reading Glamour, a World Problem, just to keep current, So this is the end of Doggy 110 and academic reading number 50. And our date today is the 29th of March. And we, really didn't go very far at all, but that's okay. From 95 to wherever we are, maybe 96, you never know.
It is 96.
Okay. I'll tell you, the voice of God comes forth and describes the limitations of man. Okay, thank you, Michael. Okay. All right, and we have an evening. No, it's a morning. I forget what it is. Doesn't make any difference right now.
We're in the morning session now.
Okay. This should be morning, right? Okay. But not MOURNING. Okay. So this is going to start with 51 and number 96, and we'll go on with that. And our next date, as shown here, will be the it looks like the 5th of April. So we're getting close. I expect to see as many of you as possible at the conference, in person when possible. Be great to see you there. APR number 6, and this is going to be an evening session. Whoop! Don't erase everything all at once, right? Okay. I have to do this now, otherwise I'll get lost entirely. Evening session, but in the morning in Phoenix, where I am now. All right. Okay, friends, we've had some interesting thoughts, I trust. And we've seen that glamour is really a question of the quality and the reality of perception. That's what we have seen. And that when we clarify our consciousness, matter of fact, in the University of the Seven Rays, when we had classes on glamour, we used to call those classes the clarification of consciousness. When consciousness is clarified, then naturally we are no longer plagued by these distortions, and we're no longer the victim of the etheric veil of distortion, okay? So we get rid of, in other words, Libra being a sign of perfect form in a certain way, gets rid of distortions. And Libra is also the sign of humility in that respect, because humility is an adjusted sense of right proportion, and all things are seen in their true relationship with each other, not exaggerated and minimized as the ego, the lower ego, would tend to do. So let's open her up and make available to you the chance to speak about things that we've discussed. First of all, we've discussed this amazing thing about about unification and one-ment, okay? And getting rid of duality, and then the stages of extricating ourselves from glamour. And we've done stage 1, which has 2 parts. Pretty much you're in the middle of glamour in part A, and part B, some beauty comes to your aid. We're going to have further discussion about how to extricate ourselves from glamour, and further, the 5 colors describe the extrication. So by the time we reach the blue and the rose, and we overturn the cross in the long dark cave, we are finished with glamour. And that's where many of us may find ourselves these days, walking in that long tunnel with the sound of many watery voices all around us, but keeping our eye on the cross. Okay, friends, your thoughts.
Michael, Vera's hand is raised.
Very good. Thank you, Michael. Okay, Vera, there you are.
Yes, hello. In the beginning, when you discussed the identification with the form vehicle, with matter, so I sort of would not see it so much as a mistake, or I see it as a necessary stage of this evolution of consciousness. Because just a thought, if we were hypothetically able to have both one foot in the form camp and another sort of being in that monadic soul consciousness, we wouldn't be able to actually do anything properly.
Well,
just a thought.
No, I think you're correct. Look, we've all been through it. And as DK says, selfishness is a most necessary phase. And it means, identifying with the personality, and materialism is identifying with the environment as if it were real. Everyone goes through this, okay? But the only fault is when it's prolonged past its time. Now, and this is the problem with the Black Lodge. It in a sense knows better, but trusts not at all, and has a very deep fear of losing the power accumulated within matter. So you have to, when the love energy comes in, you've got to let go of a lot of things, and they just don't want to do that. And there are other people too, people that just say, hey, I'm intelligent, I have a mind, I'll just work with my mind, that's it. And who cares about the love part? So if it's if the unity is delayed, if the perception of unity, perception of oneness is delayed because of fear or a selfish resistance, then we're in the wrong. Otherwise, it is, as you say, a part of every human being's ascent. And as Master DK, he tells us, all have sinned, my brother. He says, all have sinned. And it's interesting, fish, sin, and soma, it all means the body. It's in the secret doctrine. And basically the sin is embracing the lower vehicle as if it were the one reality, and just hanging on to that past the opportunity to disengage and detach. And that's why these great teachers, the Buddha and the Christ, are so important, teaching us how to disengage from unreality. So indeed, yes, as you say, we got to go through that stage.
Thank you.
Yes, okay, thank you, Vera.
And
Michael. Oh, sorry.
Tuija, yeah, go ahead, and then I see Suzanne here too. Go ahead, Tuija, please.
Yes, if you would take initiation, human and solar from the page in English version, it is 35 and number 3. And that is so interesting what he is describing, why this door or this line between the higher and the lower was strengthened. The purpose in order to hasten.
correct.
Humanity go towards the fifth kingdom.
Okay, so let's see. Whoa!
Let us read.
What have I?
Wow.
What have I done? I'm afraid I've just.
Just push Michael controls panel and with minus. Or what is it a shift?
I'll tell you what. I'm up in the levels of 500. So that's as big as it's ever going to get. And I can, although I'd like to learn how.
Yeah, it's related to Sirius.
Okay.
And second ray cycle.
Yes, that's right. Exactly so. Okay, so now we're going to go to initiation, human and solar. And we're
35.
going to go page 35 and number
3.
And here it is right in front of us.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's take a look here. And let's see what preceded it just a little bit.
If you read from the beginning.
Minor post. Therefore, things were decided in the council chamber of Shambhala. Okay, and this must have taken place in Atlanta.
No, number 3, Michael.
No, I know, but I'm just looking for the background a little bit.
Yeah, that is what happened then when the hierarchy was established.
Yeah.
And Sanat Kumara came.
Okay. And that's an interesting thing too, because the funny thing is that Shambhala was established first, but that's another subject. I would say number 3, it was also decided to make the line of demarcation between the two forces of matter and spirit clearly defined. The inherent duality of all manifestation was emphasized with the aim in view of teaching men who want to liberate themselves from the limitations of the fourth or human kingdom and thus pass on to the fifth or spiritual. So, Christ is saying, I come to bring not peace, but the sword of discrimination. The problem of good or evil, darkness or light, right or wrong, was enunciated solely for the benefit of humanity and to enable men to cast off the fetters which imprison spirit and thus achieve spiritual freedom. I mean, we have to see clearly what is our bondage in order to get rid of it. This problem exists not in the kingdoms below man, not for those, nor for those who transcend the human. Man has to learn to experience in pain the fact of the duality of all existence. So I guess it's a necessary school on our particular planet. Having thus learnt, he chooses that which concerns the fully conscious spirit aspect of divinity, as Arjuna did on the Battle of Kurukshetra, right? And learns to center himself in that spirit aspect. Having thus achieved liberation, he finds indeed that all is one. The spirit and matter are unity, that's Blavatsky's famous quote, not existing save that which is to be found within the consciousness of the planetary logos and in wider circles within the consciousness of the solar logos, and on and on. The hierarchy then took advantage of the discriminative faculty of mind, which is the distinctive quality of humanity, because humanity is Mercury, to enable him through the balancing of the pairs of opposites, soul and personality, to reach his goal and find his way back to the source whence he came. So out of all this comes the necessity to see clearly the opposites and to pass through that very painful stage where we recognize that we identify with the lower of the pairs of opposites and that we must detach ourselves from the lower of the pairs of opposites and identify with the higher while still being able to manage the lower. And the Buddha taught this and the Christ taught this too. So,
if you would read,
Yeah, go ahead.
If you would read just the one line where you were finishing, just steal from the second, do you see, where did you?
Yeah.
This decision.
Yeah, this decision led to that great struggle which distinguished the Atlantean civilization and which culminated in the destruction called the flood, referred to in many scriptures, right? And the forces of darkness and of light were arrayed against each other and this for the helping of humanity. And the struggle is going on now, right? Still persists in the and the world war through which we have just passed was a recrudescence, meaning it happened again, it precipitated again of the earlier war. And then it went on and became the phase 2 of the war. And now we are in phase 3 of the war. And we just have to hope, that somehow.
It should be just fought on the mental plane and not
Exactly.
on the physical plane.
Right. The psychological plane, I would include the astral body too, It's fought psychologically, mental, and emotional. Exactly. Yeah. So anyway, as Vera was saying, it's a necessary thing. And we have to pass through that, especially on our planet, because we have to be able to judge between the pairs of opposites as graduates. And in the beginning, you can't judge anything. And so the hierarchy sought to make it really clear, whereas the forces of darkness sought to make the distinction murky. They didn't want people to distinguish between the good and the bad. So we are clarifying.
I think this is very interesting point, and good for us to remember that this is for our benefit, all of that we have to always choose between these two. But
Yes.
and then my this is very technical thing. You said in the beginning that how did you say, monad perceives only from itself, or perceived only itself,
or perceives all things as itself. All things as itself is what I meant to say. Meaning that no matter what variety the monad perceives and gets involved in, when this true monadic consciousness is revealed as the one being the one self. That's what I mean by monadic consciousness. All things are included as the one self. Jupiter, you see.
Well, there was one sentence what made me think that we may be not can talk about the monad which we talk on the second plane in that state. We have to talk about the monad on the atomic plane, logoic plane.
Yeah, that's hard to say, yeah. It's hard
because I'm just thinking about this, that our monad is still on the cosmic physical plane, which is under the cosmic Mahat. So in one sense, it makes me hard to think that our monad would be like on the monadic way of looking, reaching the real monad. And it's stupid words, but I'm just thinking about.
I understand. I understand. Here's the thing: the monadic vehicle is a temple, and the temple is a limitation. And when the monadic vehicle is destroyed, which it is destroyed, then the essence of the monad is liberated into the sea of fire, and still greater identifications can occur that are not limited by the monadic vehicle.
And I was just thinking about, because of the when monad is sounding the sound, the first sound A, and then we are like in the realm, however high we go, we are still under the cosmic M, AUM, when we think about manifestation.
If you think about it, if you think about the cosmic planes, but then what you're talking about definitely starts on the logoic plane. The A is on the logoic plane, the AU is on the monadic plane, and the AUM is on the atomic plane. And then there are other factors involved. Yeah, it's cosmic fire, and it's all great stuff. Okay, dear, we're getting into the heavy stuff.
We can continue.
Okay.
Time has not ended.
No. Time has not run out and never will entirely. Okay. Thank you for those expanding thoughts. With Suzanne asking here, can you explain a bit further what is meant by Libra as the sign of perfect form. Actually, you know what's really interesting? If you go into the Sabian symbols, the very first degree of Libra, which, you know, the first degree tells a lot about what's going to happen in the sign ahead. And it's some kind of butterfly collection with each butterfly, not too pleasant to think, but fixated by a dart so that the form is exactly preserved. In other words, this symbolizes the beautiful archetypes on which all things are built. Of course, an archetype is a living thing, and we don't have to get into the abuse of an insect collection, a butterfly collection, you know, which has about it some sad thoughts, but there's a perfection of all these butterflies who are the archetypes, and they are fixated in exact form by these darts. So, you know, the Sabian Symbols book, either by Dane Rudyard in interpretation or Mark Edmund Jones in interpretation, he's not as easy to understand as Rudyard, tells a lot of stories about the quality of the various degrees and the signs. Now, you know, Venus is beauty, and beauty gives right proportion, and Libra is particularly the sign of ideal proportion, and hence a kind of perfection of relationship. We can call it perfect form on any of the planes, but we're used to thinking maybe of the physical form. A perfect form is there. And you see some of the paintings of certain of the great masters, and they seem to have idealized their models, and the model comes out in perfect form. Maybe not so much Picasso, he was definitely taking things apart, but when you go to Botticelli and when you look at that famous painting about Venus with the serpent around her neck, it was the idealization of Venus. It's one of the best. So, in fact, we're right there at the midpoint of the zodiac, bringing in all things in right relations, okay? Now, Libra is also the sign of right human relations. So it means a perfect interconnection between people and nations and all of that. But in terms of form life, yes, also as well. Okay. Is anybody having trouble with the sound? Alex is losing the sound intermittently. I'm on full internet, and there's nothing wrong with my internet here. So sometimes these problems are local, but if it's okay, all right. Yeah, I mean, there are local problems, and we're just not there perfectly yet, you know. We don't have perfect sound, right, Alex? Okay, all right, very good.
Michael,
Michael.
I found a reference from Return of the Christ at the very bottom of page 74, which provides a measure of hope, but it involves much effort on our part.
Okay. Well, there is 74.
Very bottom of the page.
I just want to make sure.
Yeah, it's under the law of action and reaction, letter B.
Okay. So this is the bottom. I'm having a little trouble myself right now with my view function. Do you see it? See it here?
Yes. The hate which is so dominant in the world today will, through the life of the Spirit of peace, working through the Christ, the embodiment of the love of God, be balanced by an expressed goodwill. The guarantee of the appearance of that goodwill is the excessive expression of hate, a hate which has been slowly mounting in the minds of men since the beginning of the 19th century, and which is reaching a new high at this time. A proportionate measure of the energy of love will demonstrate later as the result of the activity of the Spirit of peace, working through the Prince of Peace, as Christ sometimes been called.
It's a very important prognostication. It's so interesting to me, you know, that the beginning of the 19th century saw this sort of first-ray repulsion growing. There was a kind of Shambhala impact in 1825. It seems that, you know, we have to be careful what we talk about in terms of impacts, because he seems to differentiate them, you know, like two very big ones at the individualization of man and in the Atlantean War, and other lesser impacts such as 1825, maybe the year 2000, maybe the year 1975, lesser in nature. But nevertheless, when Shambhala is approaching, certain types of human personalities will appropriate that energy without love. And then that will stimulate the repulsion, which is hate. You know, the fourth law of the soul, the law of repulse, has a lot of first ray in that. So when first ray is misused, it becomes repulsive to the other. And now we're trying to overcome that, as it says here. So this is an important paragraph, Michael, so thanks for. Well, you know, DK, one thing after another, a master speaks words of wisdom, and we have to recognize the wisdom and realize that he's given us so very, very much. And wherever we can express love and goodwill, which is love in action, then we have to do that. He said, actually, at one point, this hate thing seems to go up and down. It was very bad in World War I. At times toward World War II, it seemed to diminish somewhat, but then when you look at the horrific things that have happened in World War II, you know, the hate was extremely strong. And he also seems to, this was written, the Reappearance of the Christ book, written after the war. And so he talks about the growth of hate even after the war. But goodwill is the balance, because all things come under the law of compensation and of balance, and the lords of karma will not allow things to get out of balance. And so servers like ourselves, New Group of World Servers, we have the responsibility of expressing the love, you know, through goodwill. It's very, very important to balance this hate, which really, I think it intensified very much in the 1860s and 1870s through Germany and through Bismarck, who was you know, militarism, Mars and all that, an avatar of the negative forces. And then it just continued to build into the 20th century. Let's see where we are now. I've never seen some of these countries so polarized as they are now. And by that I mean the United States is just frightening, and I'm sure the UK has this polarization. You know, wherever you have Gemini, and both of those second-rate countries, or, you know, gatherings of countries and nations have and states have Gemini, and so the possibility of polarization in antagonism is very strong. That's what the Civil War was all about in the United States, and people have been predicting almost gleefully that there'll be another civil war in the United States. How it would shape up, who knows, but you can see what forces there are arrayed against each other, below the diaphragm and above the diaphragm. And it's really, really clear. Ray 6, Ray 2, red versus indigo. It's all shaping up, and we have to keep that on the psycho-mental plane.
It seems to me that this paragraph is perhaps subtly speaking to identification as well as a way of resisting evil.
Well, that's very interesting that, you know, it's sometimes said, resist not evil, and then the Tibetan is telling us to battle and all of that. I guess it's in the skill in action with which one resists evil. You see, because he said, look, you've got to, the decision has been made, and now you must fight on behalf of the forces of light. And then he said, see that you battle, you know. So that sounds, you know, fairly militant, and he, you know, is a militant master in certain respects. But at the same time, there are methods of resisting evil that just don't work. And through identification, it can work, yes. Go ahead,
Yes,
Michael.
resisting evil does not work through hate.
Yes, that's well said. And he does bring that out, too. He says, you have to stand firm. You have to defeat evil without hating, basically. I'm reading a lot of that in The Externalization of the Hierarchy, which may be a fairly unread book by many. I think I've now finished maybe 60 hours of programming, or maybe a bit more, and you can find that on Makara, and maybe some of that is already on YouTube if you want to progress through that and see how that whole development occurred from before the war to within the war and following the war in the preparation for the building of the new era, which we have supposedly been doing for these past 75 years. And let's see about the Tibetan's assessment when he starts writing again. Okay, looks like Alexandra, you have your, okay, go ahead, Alex, please.
Yes, hello. Good evening. Good morning from the UK. Thank you, Michael Stacy, for that paragraph. I find that encouraging to read. The guarantee is that goodwill is the the guarantee. I can't read it now. The guarantee of the appearance of goodwill is the excessive expression of hate. So we're in a vortex of hate here at the moment. And yes, there is definitely goodwill rising in opposition to that. I took part in a march in which there were between 1 and 2 million people in the streets of London. And what was remarkable about that, they were protesting Brexit. What was remarkable about it was the goodwill and the affability of the participants, nonviolence, peaceful. I was standing myself in front of Downing Street where the entire march passed, and people were venting their booing and distaste for that place, the center of government. And what was noticeable was the lack of venom and hostility, even in their expression of opposition to the policies. So everyone, not just me, remarked that for 1 to 2 million people, it was a remarkable peaceful protest. So I just wanted to say that if there is anybody here that would like to join us, I've sent out an email to people who are on my list late last night, that today, and I do apologize to people who aren't interested or who do support Brexit, but I just want to make an appeal to anyone here who's interested. There is a large global group working together and has been for months, thanks to Michael and Tuija, and today is a crucial day because it's the day that the UK was meant to leave the European Union, and thanks to the kindness of the European Union, they've extended it for 2 weeks, and the Prime Minister has now decided to make a last-ditch effort today to bring her withdrawal agreement again before Parliament in a different form, in a deceptive form, in a confusing form, and at a time when a lot of parliamentarians were not expecting to be seated today, so might not be there. In other words, today, Brexit could happen by accident. People are not expecting it to, but it could. So between 2 and 3 p.m. GMT today, I have sent you, Michael, and Tuija, and Michael Stacy, and as I said, people on my list, a notification asking people to keep the triangle London, Brussels, Geneva in mind, to meditate for the integrity and unity of Europe, to keep in mind that our hope is for the revocation of Article 50 and all the difficulties I realize that means, and the threat to democracy, etc., being the only solution for the moment, so that the nation can stop, rethink, and be better informed what's going on. And I also wanted to say, if there's anyone here who wants to be, I know there isn't anyone who wants more emails. But if there are people who ask me and write to me and don't get information. Europeans tend to get a lot of information through their media, and also Commonwealth countries like Australia and Canada. But often people on the west coast, for example, of America, don't get the information. So if there's anyone who'd like to be added to the Brexit update list, I promise I don't send out a lot of emails. But when there is an urgent situation, I send it out. We come together to meditate. And if you just scroll over my name here on the list, you can see my email. If you want updates, just please write, and you can join this global group that's working especially today. I hope, if everyone read their email.
yeah, exactly. And here's Alexandra's email: peace4@ymail.com.
Yes, that's right. And the one I just sent out last night, the update I sent out last night, it's in 9 easy steps. One tries to give information in as clear and simple and concise a way as possible, because I appreciate we all don't need more emails. But as I said, if people are interested, for everyone to know that this is a global group working for the dissipation of glamour, which is really intensifying here in the mother of parliaments and the mother of democracy. And if anyone wants to, work with that, please let us know.
And please, will you write the letter also to Joe and BL, who can get it out to the wider list? Okay.
Okay. Yep. Okay. I'll send that.
And
right
then
now.
tell her that I suggested it, please, because they can send the large list. Obviously, Master R, as the regent of America and the regent of the UK, didn't put all this together. The regent of Europe, really, didn't put it all together to watch it fall apart. So.
And Michael, I just sent you, and also Michael Stacy, I've just sent you this a snapshot of this morning's headlines. And I just think for a group discussing glamour, if anyone wants to receive that, again, just write to me, because that is a complete example of glamour. I don't think Europeans realize how extreme right-wing are, and also Americans who have very liberal press. I don't think they realize how extreme right-wing the media here is, and how the media works as an arm of, excuse me, as an arm of glamour. And the situation that ordinary people live in, how are they supposed to get their information when the information, including from the BBC, is biased? And so it's very interesting to watch how, the mind manipulation works, and how hard we have to work.
I would just
Alex
say this.
Michael.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay.
I've sent it to you. I've sent it to you too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alex. Just a point for that. Those who have been following the process, to notice that how actually these forces are functioning. This is the point we to learn. This tiring battle, when normal person and normal way of being is that you battle, you debate, and then you get some result, and then you start to grow from that. But this has been taken back and back and back to the same issue, what should be done, even though people have been telling already what they want now. So it is so a good point of learning, and I think it is somewhat related to Taurus. I don't know what is May's chart, but she certainly has the first
Sure.
ray. And how it is good for all of us to know, because we never know how things are turning in the long run again. And we should be studying this, how persistent will we have to have, and how long time one has to just stand in the center and call, invoke, because that's our job at the moment, in order to bring the balance, because this force would absolutely knock everybody out because of this persistent standing in that, coming again and again.
I believe that she has a very strong Libra, just like Thatcher. She has very strong Virgo. She has Mars in Pisces opposing all of her planets, and I think she has Scorpio rising. We'll see.
So
we'll see. Yeah.
But Tuija, thank you. That's exactly what's happening today. Is the idea is to just keep wearing people down, wearing them down. I mean, aside from the bribery and the threatening that's going on, it's so interesting because, for example, if it gets voted down, which, you know, hopefully it will be, it's going to be, everyone is predicting already, it's going to be by a less majority. So each time people are being worn down.
That's right.
And as you say, this is the approach. It's a cult approach, actually, to just tire people.
Well, I'll tell you what,
exactly.
we have to now change our focus a little bit. Let's do that. Let's participate as best we can during this day, use our creative imagination, our alignment with hierarchy, our alignment with the group, to stand for the integrity and unity of Europe, which is a great project of Master R, just the way this fragmenting integrity of the United States is paralleling what's happening in Europe, and Master R is behind that too. Okay, look, we have to quite soon, we're going to have our meditation.
One last question, perhaps. Vera's hand has been raised for a bit.
I see it. Yes, go ahead, Vera, please.
The sentence on the screen, the guarantee of the appearance of that goodwill is the excessive expression of hate. So I see as a wonderful example of it here in New Zealand 2 weeks ago with that incident of the white extremists killed 50 people. There is now such an outpouring of unity and really firm stand. We stand really in the light and for the unity and against racism, which is quite unusual for New Zealanders, because New Zealanders are not sort of ostentatious. But it's such a strong expression of that goodwill, so it's quite palpable. So that's nice.
Yes. It's a good example, and it's something that other countries should study carefully, how she, the Prime Minister, has been handling this and the people around her. So thanks, Vera, for calling our attention to that. Okay, friends, now let's, well, you know, it gives me the idea that we will meditate on the glamour of hatred. It is the fifth head of the Hydra. It is the very center of the emotional problems, fear, hatred, and ambition. And it's seething beneath the surface. And its key is, well, it's based on fear, and perfect love casts out the fear. You can meditate upon it how you wish, but it's obvious that it is a very big problem in today's world, and it is intensifying through this fragmentation which the Black Lodge seeks to see accomplished in countries and between countries, and we have to bridge that and overcome that. So I'll turn to our meditation, and thanking you all for your sharing, and you know, for issues that are right upon us now. As I say, this is the day that that the UK was either to come up with a solution or crash out, and it's a very, very important day, actually and symbolically. And if you can tune in on what's going on within the House of Parliament there, it gives a very vivid picture of what needs to be done. So here we are with the formula for the dissipation of world glamour. Okay, so we will meditate on the glamour of hatred. Okay, and we will replace that with the great, what happened? Sorry, hatred just ran away here. Let's see if I can get it back. I know one way to do it, and I will. Okay, somehow go to the open, and here it goes. All right, we're on. So let's just all come together in the silence. And the links between us in this field of consciousness that we are creating, an invocative field of consciousness with links that unify that field, all of this can make us effective in our work. And we're going to use the protective method wisely assigned by the Tibetan as we are dealing with the most powerful of the forces of illusion, at least on our earth at this present time, and that is the emotional field where maybe 80% of the people are, 85% of the people are very strongly driven and affected. So this will make this long arm cross of divinity, he calls it. And we'll watch as our hand traces the cross, we'll realize that we are awakening the light, a cross of light. As a soul, I work in light, and darkness cannot touch me. I take my stand within the light. I work, and from that point, I never move. And we realize, the doctrine of the I will reveal the glamours, and the doctrine of the heart will overcome them and create the requisite unity that we've been talking about. Now, the preparatory stages involve bringing three lights together. So let us lift the light of vitality of matter up to the mental plane. We do this imaginatively. And there the light of the mind is met. This is the light of reason, of logic, of clear thought. So vitality and clear thought unite in a dual light. And we reach as if into the light of the soul, recognizing soul light, trying to feel that. And bringing that soul light down to fuse with the two lesser lights. And so we will have in this combination, the mind, the vitalized mind, will be held steady in the light. And we visualize the three lights coming together. Three lights are as one light. And the three are one. The light is one. And in that light shall we see light. This is the light that turns the darkness into day. There follows the formula. And as we speak the words of the formula, we visualize the great searchlight going forth from our triple light as one. And we're turning our searchlight, the group searchlight, made of all the many individual searchlights. We turn that light upon the astral plane for the detection and the destruction of glamour. Radiance are we and power. We stand forever with our hands stretched out, linking the heavens and the earth. The inner world of meaning and the subtle world of glamour. We reach into the light and bring it down to meet the need. We reach into the silent place and bring from thence the gift of understanding. Thus with the light we work, and turn the darkness into day. And we remember that the light of day is the light of Scorpio upon the Buddhic plane, where the great illusion can be dispelled, and that the fight with glamour is the most intense under Scorpio. Now we're going to strengthen our beam. We call upon the spiritual will within ourselves, reflecting through the sacrifice petals and the jewel in the lotus and the atmic plane, and of course even the origin of it all, the monad. And we say to strengthen the beam as we watch the spiritual will enter it, stiffening it, making it a true weapon for the dissipation and dispersion and destruction of glamour. We say, with power upon its beam, the light is focused on the goal. The glamour that we are going to work on is the glamour of hatred. And think for a moment, before we get into these words of power, what has been the effect of hatred over the years within the life of humanity? Think first about what it has brought to us. And certainly it has worked against the manifestation of the will, the purpose, and the plan of our planetary deity. And so now we'll use these words of power, working as we see fit, and then we'll have our silence for intensity of purpose. The power of our united light prevents the appearance of the glamour of hatred. The power of our united light negates the quality of the glamour of hatred from affecting humanity. The power of our united light destroys the life behind the glamour of hatred. Now in the silence, we'll use these words of power, working each as best we can, and always remembering that we're working as a group as we visualize the light penetrating into the glamour and producing its weakening and its dissipation. So 5 minutes of silence and intensity of purpose while we see this work proceeding. all of these glamours, we will find them interrelated, and where there is this very strong sense of duality, and by the way, that's a Martian quality, and from the planet Mars comes much of this repulsion that we call hatred, and its satellites represent Phobos and Deimos, fear and terror. A man hates what he fears. We can see goodwill, love, a clear respect for others, the intention of lifting all to the extent they can be lifted. We can see these things substituting for this wicked compulsion. In its most virulent form, arising out of wicked pride and hateful lust and a fear which is not only not recognized but cannot be overcome without real sense of spiritual values. So we'll work with that. We'll work with that this week, and we'll try to look for clear-sightedness and cooperation everywhere, and where the evildoer must be eliminated, let there be no hatred in the elimination. That's how the first ray in Moria's group would handle it, without hatred. The destruction of evil, yes, but without hatred. So let us sound the Om as we first withdraw our beam from off the astral plane and bring it back into the three lights as one, the light of matter, the light of mind, the light of soul, and have the faith that some little bit of work has been done to bring love and goodwill closer to human expression. We must keep up this work. From the inside, it's essential, just as the triangle's work is essential. And it all is for the reappearance of the Christ, preparing the field. 3 times the Om. Seeing the illusion weaken, the glamour weaken, the Maya weaken. Okay, friends. We'll be back tomorrow. We're still on the morning schedule, and I think we'll have some readings from the Destiny of the Nations. It'll be a broadcast. Tuija will be doing that from Finland. I'll be tuning in and trying to help as best I can from here. And let's keep up our steady esoteric work on behalf of the divine plan. Thank you very much for your attendance and your work. And we will continue. Okay. Bye for now.